Hi, I'm Emma Smith, Associate Publisher at F1000, and I'll be talking to you today about the process of open peer review at F1000 platforms from the perspective of reviewers. But what is open peer review? Well, it's a catch-all term used to describe a peer review model where some or all of the peer review process is shared publicly. This can include things like reviewers' identities being made known to authors and to the public, sharing the peer review reports alongside the published article, and making manuscripts available before the formal peer review process has been completed. All F1000 platforms operate on an open peer review model. Here, I'll briefly describe how the F1000 publishing model works before we dive into open peer review in a bit more detail. Firstly, the authors submit their paper to the platform, and our editorial operations team performs comprehensive pre-publication checks on the paper. Once the article passes those checks, the paper is published on the platform, fully typeset with the DOI. From there, our editorial operations team secures expert reviewers for the manuscript. And once the review reports are received, they are published alongside the article and with the reviewers' names attached. Authors can revise their article in response to reviewer comments. Once the article passes peer review, that's when it's indexed according to that platform's indexing agreements. F1000 supports a wide variety of article types across our platforms, allowing researchers to share outputs from across the research project lifecycle. As a reviewer, it's worth noting the kind of article that you're being asked to peer review, as it may not be a standard research article, so you may need to adjust the kinds of comments that you're making to reflect the article type that is under review. Now, let's dive into the open peer review aspect in a bit more detail. Firstly, our reviewer selection team will find and invite appropriate reviewers for each manuscript. We have a wide array of tools that search through things like publication history to ensure the right experts are reviewing the article. Authors can also suggest potential reviewers, and our editorial team will check those author suggestions against our reviewer criteria before moving forward with those suggestions. We'll touch on the criteria in just a moment, but it's worth highlighting that in cases where a reviewer might not fully meet the criteria, for example, they may be an early career researcher with limited publication history, we can instead invite a more senior member of their lab or department, and the originally suggested reviewer could take the role of co-reviewer. All co-reviewers are named on the peer review report, so everyone contributing to the review process can receive credit for their work. Across our F1000 platforms, we look for the following in our reviewers. Reviewers should be qualified, meaning that they hold a doctorate or equivalent qualification. Reviewers should be subject matter experts, meaning they have relevant and recent publication history within the field. Reviewers should be impartial, meaning they don't have any competing interests that could influence their assessment of the work. And reviewers should be global, meaning that they are from different institutions and regions of the world. By agreeing to review an article for an F1000 platform, reviewers agree to abide by our Code of Conduct. Our Code of Conduct states that our reviewers should read the article in full. This includes viewing tables, figures, and associated data. Reviewers should be thorough, ensuring that the article as a whole, as well as its constituent parts, are reviewed. Reviewers should be specific in their comments, so that authors can fully address any issues that have been raised. This includes reviewers providing references to other papers in the literature should that be needed. Reviewers should be constructive when providing their criticism, so that the concerns raised can be concretely addressed by reviewers. And reviewers should avoid derogatory comments or tone. The review should be written respectfully and focus on the content of the article. When submitting your peer review, you'll first need to make an account on the platform that you've been asked to review for, if you don't already have an account there. Once you've made your account, the link in your peer review acceptance email will take you to a fairly standard form to submit your peer review. Please just double check that you're providing your review for the correct version of the manuscript. You'll also see a drop-down menu to select a peer review status for your article. We'll get into that in just a moment. In addition to the standard review submission form that you see, you will also see a series of questions tailored to the article type of the publication you're reviewing. It's worth double-checking that the text comments you're providing align with the questions that you're answering. For example, if you think the authors have only partially provided enough detail in their methods, ensure that you're clear in the text of your report about what is missing from their methodology. Once you have submitted your peer review, our editorial operations team will check that the peer review is complete before it is published. They may occasionally request changes to your review, so please keep an eye on any correspondence from our editorial team in the days after you've submitted your report. One of the unique aspects of the F1000 model is that we ask reviewers to provide a peer review status with their report. This status gives readers an at-a-glance understanding of the peer review and assessment of the paper that they're reading. The peer review status also indicates when a paper is ready to be indexed, for example, in PubMed. As a reviewer, you can select one of the following statuses. Select Approved if you think the paper is basically fine as it is, and the only revisions needed, if any, are quite minor. Select Approved with Reservations if you think that the paper could be improved with revisions, and that these revisions may impact or improve the paper's conclusions. And select Not Approved if the paper needs substantial work in order to support the conclusions that have been drawn. It's worth highlighting that Not Approved is not a rejection. Authors can revise their manuscript and resubmit, so issues that you've raised in your first review that could be perceived as a fundamental flaw in the manuscript might be addressed in later versions of the article. A manuscript only passes peer review when it's received 2 approved peer review statuses, or 1 approved status and 2 approved with reservations statuses. You may also find these tips useful in drafting a peer review. Firstly, the review should provide easy-to-follow advice for authors, with concrete actions that they can take to improve the quality of their article. Typically, a peer review report provides a high-level summary of the conclusions and the claims in the paper, with an overview of both the strengths and weaknesses of the paper. The peer review should showcase how the article fits within the current field of research and suggest the potential impact that the findings might have both in the field or in society. When providing your detailed comments about the article, reviews typically list the major issues first, issues that affect robustness or validity of the conclusions, before going into some of the more minor issues. For example, a suggestion on how to rearrange figure panels to make the data easier to understand. The review should also be structured and organised in a way that is easy for the authors to understand. For example, if you mention that key information about equipment is missing, you might want to refer to the specific paragraph number within the methods where you are expecting to find this information. Now, as I mentioned, authors can update their article at any time in the peer review process. When we publish a new version of an article, we send out invitations to the original reviewers. This allows you as a reviewer to update your peer review report and peer review status to take into account the changes that the authors have made. As I mentioned, the peer review outcome of an article is directly determined by your peer review status selection. Only papers that receive 2 approved or 1 approved, 2 approved with reservations statuses are indexed. As such, re-reviewing an article is incredibly helpful and important within the F1000 model. Where you may previously have had concerns about the paper, the authors could now have addressed those concerns, pushing your status from not approved or approved with reservations into an approved status, which could mean that that article is now ready for indexing. It's also worth highlighting that all versions of the article and all peer review reports remain published, so everyone can trace the history of an article and you will receive credit for the work that you've done in the peer review process at all stages. Here is an example of a peer review report published on F1000 Research, F1000's flagship publishing platform. As you can see, the review history of the manuscript is listed in the tab on the right-hand side, and this includes a summary of the most recent peer review statuses for the article. You can also view how these review statuses have changed for each reviewer across the versions of the manuscript. And you can see who has reviewed the manuscript, so reviewers receive direct credit for their contributions to the peer review process. Reviewers can also link their accounts with their ORCID ID to give extra visibility to their contributions. The full review reports can be accessed by clicking the Read button underneath the peer review status. Breaking down this peer review report in full, you can see usage metrics for the peer review, along with a link allowing anyone to directly cite the peer review independent of the article. You can also read the full text of the article and see its review status. This particular review provides a very detailed consideration of the article, highlighting the strengths of the paper as well as providing actionable recommendations for the authors. As you scroll down the peer review, you can also see those questions that I mentioned that are a response to the article-specific questions, along with the full references that the reviewer has cited in their review. You can also find below that relevant declarations for the peer reviewer, and along with the full author response should one be available. Now, having broken that down, I wanted to zoom back out from F1000, as we appreciate that open peer review is a less common practice within publishing, so we wanted to bust some of the myths that you might have heard about open peer review processes. Some of the concerns that we hear are around whether open peer review is as rigorous as traditional forms of peer review. At F1000, we have a reviewer criteria and review selection team dedicated to ensuring that only qualified experts review a manuscript. In addition, the entire review process is transparent, which the reviewers know going into the process, which incentivizes a considered and rigorous review process. Another concern that we hear is that some reviewers may be concerned about negative repercussions on themselves or on authors if they provide honest feedback. It's worth highlighting that an entirely transparent review process holds authors and reviewers accountable so that poor behaviour can be called out where it happens. Moreover, where critiques have been made in a manuscript, these critiques are provided in a more considered and constructive way, allowing the authors to respond in a similarly thoughtful manner. We've also heard concerns that authors might not value open comments as much as traditional reviews. However, in much the same way that a transparent process holds reviewers to account to provide a considered review, so does it hold authors accountable to provide a considered response to those reviews. In addition, by making the full text of the peer review reports available, authors can better understand the context of the reviewer's comments and can more accurately address those reviewer concerns. Taken together, we find that open reports are often considered more valuable by researchers, not less. So with that in mind, what are the benefits of open peer review in general? A transparent process means that everyone's actions are public and they can be held accountable for their comments and responses. This reduces the possibility of bias and enables poor behaviours to be called out. This then incentivises a more constructive and collaborative approach to reviewing, where authors and reviewers approach the process communally and constructively. By providing reports and responses publicly, everyone can benefit from the peer review process. For example, early career researchers can more easily gain insight into the process of peer review and how they themselves should structure their peer review reports. Open peer review practices can also accelerate research discovery through things like making works available before formal peer review, and by providing public comments, especially at an earlier stage than in the traditional process. As a reviewer, open identities allow you to gain direct credit for the time and effort that you put into reviewing. In addition, F1000 provides DOIs for each review report, so as a reviewer you can receive citations for your peer reviews and track the impact that your review is having. Publicly reviewing articles also allows you to demonstrate and share your expertise with the world, so the effort that you put into the review can benefit the wider scholarly community. It can also help facilitate collaborations with researchers who read your peer review, and you can potentially arrange for a collaborative agreement with them. The review itself can also be collaborative, allowing earlier career researchers to benefit from mentorship within peer review and receive credit for their contributions in the process as well. And as a last note, if you review for F1000 research, you're eligible for a 20% APC discount for one article that you submit and have published up to a year after your peer review. If you're interested in becoming a reviewer for an F1000 platform, please download and complete a volunteer form and send it to the editorial email address of that particular platform. You'll find all of that relevant information down in the reviewer guidelines section of the F1000 platform that you're interested in reviewing for. If you see a specific article that you would like to review, you can include the article in your volunteer form and CV email and explain why you think you'll be a good fit to review that article. We can't guarantee that you'll be invited to review your chosen paper or any paper, unfortunately, but we can say that you're far more likely to be invited if we have access to your CV. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this information useful. Do feel free to get in touch if you have any questions at all.